Microphone check. Break a 19. There we go. There we go. Can you guys hear me better now? So, 1986. Do you guys remember 86? Some of you? Yeah? It was a good year. So a lot of things happened. I'll just kind of give you a recap what happened in 1986 because when I started to write down my testimony, I just Googled 1986. I figured it was a good place to start. And just a little bit of a recap. In 1986, Mike Tyson was at the peak of his boxing career. He became the youngest heavyweight boxing champion in history at the time. Wayne Gretzky led the Oilers to another Stanley Cup win in the 86-87 year. I think they lost the 85-86, but they won the 86-87, so it was half a good year anyways. NASA's space shuttle, the Challenger, broke apart nearly 2 minutes into takeoff, and Chernobyl happened, so there was kind of a few tragedies as well. I'll leave you with a happy one. Nintendo, for all you gaming nerds out there, actually released the game Legend of Zelda in Japan, which is kind of the building blocks and the foundations for all the role-playing games today. So, legends were made in 1986. I'll be modest. So, I've been excited to share this testimony. I've shared it once before. We all know why, because in Revelations it talks about the spirit of prophecy is the one who bears testimony to Jesus. So when we share our testimony and what Jesus has done for us, we're actually, speaking that into somebody else's life. We've seen that even here in this church. When Sally's knee was acting up, we prayed for her and she got healing. Right, shortly after that, Lisa, shared that her knee was getting better after prayer, and same with my wife, right? So we see that, right? The testimony of Jesus is a spirit of prophecy, right? So today, I want to speak freedom into your guys' life because I have gone through some times, right? And we'll fast forward from 86 to 14, when I was 14 years old, only because at that point in time in my life, I knew more then than I actually do now. And if you don't believe me, ask my mom and dad. They'll tell you. Yeah. I was actually raised in a really good home. Mom and dad never drank. They never smoked. They're obviously the pastor, teacher of this church. But I was a child with a little bit of energy. And, somebody told me at a young age that a bad attitude was better than no attitude. And that kind of steered me in the wrong direction. And I ended up getting into a little bit of trouble at school. I left one school to get kicked out of the other and then back again. And it kind of led me to a bunch of friends that they just had a different upbringing than me. This is in my life where I started smoking cigarettes and I started smoking pot. And, lo and behold, after smoking weed, your attitude changes about a few things. And it changed about school. I figured it was a place that I didn't need to be. I didn't want to be. I seen the prosperity of Grand Prairie and I wanted that. And I knew that I didn't need a high school education to get it. So I'm going to share some statistics with you of Grand Prairie. If you're not here because Jesus called you here, it's probably because there's money here. It's a prosperous city. So in 2001, 65% of the population actually own their own homes. In 2016, the census shows that the population was at 69,000. However, Grand Prairie served as a trading area of about 290. It was the youngest city in 2018 with the age of 31.9. There were actually more residents under the age of 5 than over the age of 65. The income was $118,000. The average home price was $304, and rent was $1,100. So this was a prosperous city. A lot of people coming and going. It's what I wanted. I wanted this lifestyle. I've seen a lot of people. A lot of my friends had bikes, boats, quads, and that's what I wanted. I knew I didn't need to go to school. I did, however, need to pass a P test because I had been smoking pot. There were jobs that were, restricted from me because I couldn't do it. So I buckled down. I did what I had to do. I didn't even fake it. I actually did pass a P test. And because I kind of, I got one thing out of my life, usually, and it was a big thing, I just kind of filled it with another. And I started drinking at this point in time. And now I had drank before, but it wasn't, at this point, it wasn't to the extent that I was about to. And it started off kind of slow, like one beer a night, and it just escalated there for a while when I was fracking. I'd wake up at 4 to be at the shop at 5. I wouldn't get home till 9, and I would drink till midnight, about 15 beers, and then I would sleep for 4 hours and do it all over again. And lo and behold, it just kind of escalated, and it led to cocaine. Cocaine put me in the hospital for a few months. I ended up having myocarditis, and you'd think that I would smarten up for a bit, and I guess I kind of did, but it came back, and when it came back with a vengeance. And I ended up having to start selling cocaine just to provide for my habit. My habit, just for my own personal use, was about $300 a day, and that was me buying it at bulk. I ended up losing my job. I lost my house. And at this point in time, I still had a habit that I couldn't afford. So I switched over to pint or meth. So again, I just traded one for the other. Drug addiction is a progressive thing. It starts small, it snowballs. Nobody ever meant to. It just kind of happened, and that's what it did for me. Meth brought me to a whole new low. It took a very big toll on me. I began to segregate myself from everyone else. I became depressed, and there was a time in my life where I actually tried to take my own life. It was a very, very low point. And, I guess, there's sometimes, you think when people hit their lows, there's nowhere to go but up. But there was no upward motion at that time. I just dangled at the bottom for quite a long while. It was kind of sad and depressing. And at the time, I didn't realize it. I do now. The only thing that really got me out of it was prayer. It was the prayer from my grandma. A lifetime of prayer from my grandma, a lifetime of prayer from my mom and from my wife and my dad. I know there was times where, Dad's kind of shared it a few times. He'd kind of like, why can't Tyson be delivered? And you all kind of hope for that revival tent meeting that people just get knocked with the Spirit. And that does happen. It can happen, but it didn't happen to me. It was a very, very, very long, hard struggle to get out of it. So if you're sitting here today and you're struggling with something, it doesn't have to be, addictions or anything, just keep it in prayer, Every time the addiction came on me, that was kind of, I even had to start praying in it, and I gave it to God each time, and he slowly got me out of it. I had to give it sometimes every 5 minutes, and those, after the 5 minutes, sometimes it would be every hour, and then it would be every day, and then it would, weeks, and they became months, and now it's become years. So I'm free. Who the Son set free is free indeed. So I want to share that with you guys. This was a verse that actually John Bryson gave to me when I was in the middle of it. I reached out to John quite a few times. So I'm going to end with this. And it's found in Romans, and it says, "Therefore, since we have been justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have gained access by faith into this grace in which we now stand. And we boast in the hope of the glory of God. Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that sufferings produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts today." So there you go. It's my testimony.
Well, I can say I'm thankful. So thankful. God is so very faithful. And sometimes it seems like it's a long haul. As Tyson mentioned, he was probably 14 or 15, and I remember when he was 15 and I was in my room and crying and praying, and the Lord gave me a scripture, and I stood on that. And it was a good years that I stood on that. And I do also want to make mention, in regards to faithfully persevering in prayer and standing behind someone in your prayer, I want to give credit and honor to Brittany, because she stood behind him faithfully in prayer and as a wife and a mother. And there aren't even words to say, Brittany, how much I honor you for that. you could have walked away. So many times you could have walked away. But somehow or another, God just gave you the strength to be faithful and endure. And I'm so very, very thankful for that. Sorry. All right. One more. Joe, come on. He might preach to us for a while, so.
Beautiful faces, because normally I'm in the back and I'm staring at the back of your heads, but you're looking great this morning. For some of you that do know me, I used to be in public speaking a lot, and I spoke to a number of people, youths in general, because I was at-risk teen public speaker. And inside of there, I've learned to deal with people and especially teens, when they're younger, they got judgmental eyes and like, boo, you suck. So forgive me if I'm working out some nerves. So last night, as I was thinking about, I could feel the nerves already. Last night, as I was thinking about my testimony, where God has brought me through, I was holding River. And she was cooing and awing, and it was like, for me, evidence of where God has brought me from and the blessing that is evident in my life every single day. So forgive me if I cry a little bit. I'm a bit of a crier sometimes.
It's all
but
right.
We're going to get through this. For those of you that don't know, I have been awesome for 37 years of my life. And again, I used to do public speaking, but I used to do breakdancing a lot. I am Native American that has chief descent in my blood from 5 generations ago, which it matters in this story I'm about to tell. But I grew up in Carnegie, Oklahoma, as a small reservation next to a popular town. And I was brought up the traditional way. We went to powwows. I dressed and danced till I was 16 years old. Went to peyote meetings. We did a lot of stuff because that's just the way that I was born into. You don't know any different, right? And when I was going to school, I used to always talk native Kiowa, or Koigu as we say it, and people used to say, what does that word mean? So it was like, we're just brought up very, very traditional in that, and I'm very, thankful for that. My father was a truck driver, and he was away all the time, but he managed to send money home in order to provide for the family. And that's kind of where problems kind of started for myself and my brother, because having an absent father inside of the home was you have to make decisions on your own. And you have to come to these conclusions and thoughts and everything on your own, so you get a mixture of experiences in life as you get older. Mom moved us to a bigger town for better opportunities, but the problems kind of just got worse as we progressed into a different town outside of the reservation. Different key members in my family took to alcohol like fish takes to water, and it was very hard growing up, because my life started as an adult at the age of 13. Mom would always have these house parties, and these random strangers would just come through, and we kind of accepted it, because on the reservation you just accept that's what it is. That's how people live their lives. So you grow with that mentality. And inside of that, I can remember there was one incident to where there was a guy that was dating my mom at the time, and they got into a dispute, and this guy ended up pulling a firearm from his concealed wherever he had it. And I remember grabbing my sister and taking her into the closet, and golly, didn't think it would hurt this much. I remember taking her into the closet, and I remember just playing the quiet game, just shh, shh, shh. And I remember peeking open the door and looking, and I remember he took the firearm that he had, and he pointed it towards the closet like he was going to discharge it, but it clicked, click, 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 and nothing came out of it. And I think that was the first time that I'd met God as a youth. Golly, normally I'm really good at speaking to people. But anywho, times like that got got a little tougher because I became the protector of my family. And if you know me personally in the streets, that's what I am. I love to communicate truth to people, and I love to communicate the better versions of yourself. Like, let's get to that. So that has been the majority role of my life, as being that person. And I can remember there were a couple of instances where God showed up in my life there's undeniably that he was there. And this same incident, well, this gentleman that was, this person that was dating my mother, called me one night. I called the house phone because back then cell phones weren't popping, and it was all landlines. And he called and said, your mom is passed out down here. And I remember getting my brother, and we ran all the way down there to, like, it's like 12 blocks down the street, and found my mother, like, face first in the floor. And the only thing that I could think of was, we got to get her home. So my brother picked her up on one shoulder, and I picked her up on the other shoulder, and we began to run as fast as we could. And I know that was a lot of trauma to, like, deal with as a child, but the memories that I have from those moments were God telling me where he was in the room, how he interacted in this situation, what he's continuing to bring me through to this day. And that memory is so funny because every time when it's fall, you feel the cold air in your lungs, and it's like a memory that brings me back to that moment. But not as a bad one, not at all, because I believe that God gave my brother and I strength in order to get her home. Like, there was nothing more besides the air in our lungs and the strength in our backs to go. And we were like all of 13. I was 13. My brother was 15. That's a lot of weight for. I'm not saying my mom is huge, but you know. Sorry. Yeah, 12 blocks is a lot for a young man. But as soon as I graduated high school, I moved away. I moved away as fast as I could. Got my own life started at 17, full-time job in an apartment, and that was just my life. With being from the place that I am, some of the situations that we go through are cyclical. They're cycles of generational curses that we go through, and I found myself in one. So I went from disconnecting from my family and where I was to finding my own house parties, to finding my own source and cycle of what I thought was happiness. I continued that lifestyle until I was 22. I worked in a warehouse for 5 years, and I was a supervisor at 21. It's a lot of weight for a young man to take up on his shoulders, but I knew no different. That was just the mentality that I knew, is that you got to provide for yourself and for your family. So this is where things start to get better. Inside of those moments, there was one moment that I can remember where, I'm sorry if this gets pretty heavy, but I believe that testimony should be raw in their own format in order to show where God, his strength is. And in one of the moments that I remember being in a small household, we had a bedroom of one that slept 5 of us. And one night I can remember hearing a voice in my head as I'm like watching a movie with my brother and eating popcorn. Love popcorn. And I remember hearing this voice say, get up and run. Get up and run. And I was like, man, hopefully I'm not, hearing double movies here. And then I heard my mom's voice. And then I remember thinking that I think she's outside. I think I hear her. So I go out the back door and I look, and in the street I see my mom in a dim-lighted car. Her hair was just, I'll spare you the details, but the gist of it is that the boyfriend that she had at the time was beating on her. And I remember sprinting full speed as fast as I could to just jump and drop kick. It was in my head, just jump. But I can remember as soon as I got on the side of the house, it was like I stepped on a treadmill. And I just kept running and running and running. And I believe in that moment that it was God holding me back from something that could have been a lot worse. So in that moment, I realized that, man, this is a crazy lifestyle. If this is normal for anyone else, I don't want to do this thing. I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. And that's what shot me into, like, okay, I'm going to go live my own life. My family's got to take care of themselves. They got to do their own thing, And in that amount of time, I was breakdancing. I was learning how to breakdance. And I started at, like, the age of 12 and ended at, like, 27 when my back started hurting. Old age. But yeah, it still hurts today. But in that amount of time, I had friends that I would go see, and we'd go to these dance parties and these get-togethers, and that was our outlet. That was our way of like not having to deal with the reality of whatever was going on in the moment. And when I moved away one time, there was a young gentleman, Christian, popular guy, who came to one of our dance sessions, and he was like, "Hey, man, you're cool." And I was like, "Hey, you're cool too." I don't know how it transpired like that, but his name was Craig, and he invited me to come to this facility where everyone was dancing at the time. I said, "Okay, cool." We started to go dance, and I still knew nothing of Christ in that moment. I just knew that, breakdancing is really cool. And my brother and I went for many of times to that place, and then one night I can remember he invited me to a youth group, and we're going to dance at this youth group, and it's going to be awesome. So I was like, okay. So we get to that youth group, and I remember standing backstage. And my hands began to shake, and my chest began to rattle. And I'm like, man, this feels like an anxiety attack. I don't know what this is. I don't know what we're doing here. I'm going to go dance in front of these Christian kids. And no, I'm not feeling this. I'm going to go home. And then he comes up to me, and he puts his hand on my shoulder, and he goes, "Brother Joel, I think it's your time." I was like, "Time to go out, time to dance. This is my time. I'll go out." And he said, no, man, I'm feeling something different. So he grabs a microphone from behind the stage, walks up front, and says, "I'm so sorry, everyone. We're going to pause the show for a minute because I think the Lord is doing something in this moment." And I was like, "Oh man, it's one of these Christian things. Wonder what he's going to be doing." So I'm sitting back there, and I'm still feeling his rattling feeling. I'm like trying to creep out the back door, and he says, "Joel," and I was like, "Oh, okay, well, here we go. Hey, everybody, how's it going?" And he says, "I really feel like you hold a lot of things on your shoulders, like you're a backpack of emotions, and you just feel these things that I feel like tonight is your night." And I was like, "Oh, man, I've never felt this way before." Before I felt crying, I've always felt anger. So immediately, anger, then crying, I was back and forth with the whole emotion. And then he says, "I'm going to pray for you right now." He says, "Sorry, everyone, we're going to get through this right now." He says, "Lord, we come before you in this moment right here just to break down any walls." And as soon as he said that, my knees began to buckle. And I fell to the floor. And I was like, "Oh, what is this feeling?" And in this moment, Christopher remembers this, and Kelsey, that they were huge on crumping. Crumping is a type of dance form where they throw their arms. But I believe in some formats it was the dance of David. It was hard. It was like emotional. So I remember buckling to the floor, and then this crump music comes on. So you can imagine, I don't know Christ. I'm on the floor crying in front of all these kids. I don't know what's going on. I'm just probably going to try to roll out of here. And maybe nobody sees me. But I begin to go down to my knees, and that's when I felt that same voice that was in the room. He says, "Get up and run," was, "Now you're going to stay. I am here. I am." Breathe it out. He says, "I am that I am." So mind you, he was speaking scriptures before I knew the scriptures. And inside of that, that was enough to open my rib cage. I felt the hands of God open my rib cage. And hands began to come in and pull all those things that were, I've seen my sister inside of that room again. I've seen my mom dragging her home. I've seen her inside of that car. I've seen those like just flashing in front of me, and like hands just scooped it away, and it was done. First time I met God was on the dance floor, and I could not forget it, and that's when God became evident to me, more real than the feelings that I felt of emotion or any rage that I've ever gone through my body. That was real for me, but that's not where it stopped. So I'm sitting there, and mind you, this music is going on, and everybody's like hooping and hollering, like slapping my back real hard. I'm like, man, is this supposed to hurt? I guess. But I remember one of them, there was a guy named Nubs. His name was Brandon. I remember him slapping my back, and he was like, "Get up, man of God. Get up, man of God." Mind you, I don't know any Christianese. I don't know any of these Christian terms or anything. I just hear someone screaming. And I tried to get up. My knees buckled again. As soon as I went face forward, I look over, and my brother is right next to me with his eyes just bawling, feeling the same thing that I'm feeling. And my brother's not saved at that point either. So my first thoughts was, how did he get in here? Who invited this guy? But no, seriously. He was being saved at the same time with me. So since then, since I received Christ in my heart, I wanted to relive that feeling like an addict. I wanted to re-go through those steps because that was the most high I've ever been in my life. And I wanted to continue that out. So I joined the School of Practical Ministry after that. And I used breakdancing as a medium, as a tool in order to communicate to people that have heard the word Christ and the scriptures so much that they're like, yes, Jesus, but if I can dance for you for a second, then I can talk to you about Christ. That's kind of the format that I followed. But then I've learned that there was power in that. There was power in breaking down those walls and those generational curses for people that used to feel like how I felt. The power of Christ I felt as moving through dance at the time, and I was privileged to be a part of it. So that was when I got to know Christ. Now we're going to fast forward 4 years. When I joined the School of Practical Ministry, I have toured the world like 4 times over. I've been to Paris 7 times. I've been to Germany 5 times. I've been all throughout Europe doing this exact same thing, dancing and then talking about Christ. I got so integrated into the organization that I began to give altar calls. I began to talk to people about Christ and how good how good his love is and what he can do for you. I've moved through all the anxieties and moved through all the fear and all the things that I've dealt with as a young man. And mind you, at this age, I'm all of like 24, I believe. So to move through that, I started to see the whole reconciliation of where God said he would start something and finish it. So he wasn't even finished. He started, but it was like, I'm on prime journey now. So I remember coming back from Germany, and they said, you got to go to North Carolina. And inside of North Carolina, there was a group of orphanage kids. There was up to 25 kids, and they lived in different areas. And I remember one night, I don't remember a whole lot about the journey, but I do remember the pinnacle of that night is that I gave an altar call to all these kids that don't know Christ. And like, I think all 100 of them like received Christ in that moment. And I can remember it was dark. There was a pond outside and it was freezing. And all of them said, I want to know Christ. We went down to that water and froze in there and led every single one of them and baptized them. And I can remember when they came out of there, God's voice was evident again in my head, around me, that all these cold, wet, dripping hands placed on me, on my back, on my shoulder, and these kids began to say, I want to pray for you. I want to do for you what you have done for other people. It was a lot going on that night. Man, it was a lot going on, but these are, yes. So continuing on, these kids are praying for me. Now I'm weeping again, because obviously when the wind changes, I start to cry. Because God has done a lot of amazing things in my life to where I can't help but to. I mean, if you ever got to the point where you love Christ so much, like the wind moves you, that's where I've been my entire life. And you may see me as a silent guy or not talking about it a whole lot, but man, I love to live my life according to that. But when we're praying, these kids, I begin to cry again. And I remember this mom comes out of nowhere, and she goes, I feel like you need the hug of a mother, the love of a mother to secure you from all the places that your mother wanted to be with you. Now, she doesn't know my backstory. She doesn't know all that stuff that happened with my mom, but that was God evident showing up in my life in the form of this lady with cold hands on me in North Carolina. So the parts to where God has showed up in my life I can't deny them, even if I could. Even through the parts where we go through the dry seasons, it's still like these are the memories that hold me through. So since then, my mother has found Christ. She has been saved for 7 years now. And in 7 years, she's been sober. And in that, we celebrate every single year. I always tease her about KFC because that's her favorite place to go. Like, hey, Mom, I send her pictures of KFC signs, on moments of her anniversary, But my mom was a true sign of strength through that. My dad and I kept a connection through that entire time, but, it might as well have been through a cell phone because that's just the separation. But I don't despise or hate my father for what has went on. My dad did what he had to do in order to secure the family and to help us. So painting a bigger picture, when the ministry was done, in that time, I was very thankful, and then I moved to Grand Prairie, and then that was back in 2012. And I've been with the same job since then, and my life has been abundantly blessed. I got 2 beautiful daughters, and we have one on the way. Kelsey's. What's so funny? Good job, Kelsey. It's funny, she paid me $20 this morning not to include her in this testimony, so we both share the same bank account, so it just comes back to me, whatever. It all works out. But my life is blessed, and I can't help but to hold one of my daughters or to see them go through their milestones and just begin to cry, because this is just an encouragement to those who have been through trauma in their past. The generational curse can stop with you. These things can stop with you if you choose to rise up and see them for what they are. And please give strength to those who need it if they are continuing the same pattern as their mothers or fathers, or just these things that come upon them. Do not live your life in fear. Live it with love, because life is too short for that. But God is real, and God has been evident and brought me through a lot of things in my life. So there you have it. Appreciate this opportunity to be able to come up and talk and speak about this whole thing. And yeah, you guys have a good Sunday.
Krista, can you come? Wonderful. Wow. Who knew? God is good, isn't he? He is so faithful. We're so thankful and so blessed, and in the miracles he does, and deliverance, and the freedom that we have. In your freedom, Krista sang earlier, in your freedom we will live. Thank God. We don't have to be bound by our past or our present or anything like that, or any kind of addiction or bondage or whatever it might be. God can set us free. I just thank you guys, Tyson and Joel, for sharing. And so going forward, I might voluntold one or two of you to share your testimony now and then. I've got one particular son-in-law in mind. He's trying to get the courage together. And there might be others. I don't just necessarily mean the younger generation, because I know some of you my age and thereabouts have a dynamic testimony as well. So be thinking of that and come and chat with me, and we'll see if we can get that door open. Let's stand. We're going to close with a worship song together, a praise song. And I want you to just thank the Lord this morning for what he's done in the lives of these two young men. It is a testimony to the faithfulness and goodness of God. And thank him for what he's done in your own life today.